Let's try and understand what's happening with Germany's military. It's a bit like a story about a family, a house, and a watchdog.
Okay, so picture a family. They live in a big house, they have a lot they need to protect, right? And for a long, long time, they felt totally safe.
You see, they had this amazing watchdog. I mean, this dog was powerful, it was reliable, it scared off absolutely anybody who even thought about causing trouble. It was the perfect guardian.
But, things change. They started looking at the budget. And that dog, well, it was expensive to feed. The neighborhood seemed pretty quiet anyway, so they decided to make a change.
And they figured they could get away with it because, well, their next-door neighbor had this absolutely massive dog. Just having that dog around was enough to keep the whole block safe, and hey, it didn't cost them a dime.
And then, things really changed. A real threat showed up. Not some far-off problem, but a wolf, right there, circling their fence.
And just when that wolf appears, their neighbor starts talking about moving out and, of course, taking his big dog with him. All of a sudden, that family is feeling very exposed, very vulnerable. That analogy? In a nutshell, that's the problem Germany is facing right now.
Now, you'd think Germany must be totally unprepared. But here's the crazy part. On paper, that's just not true. The German military, the Bundeswehr, actually has this super detailed, top-secret plan for a potential war with Russia.
We're talking about an incredibly complex strategy. It's a 1,200-page document that maps out everything, logistics, command, supply chains, to move almost 1 million NATO troops to the Eastern Front. But for all its detail, it's missing the single most important piece of the puzzle.
And this right here, this is the massive existential problem facing the German army. A perfect plan is completely useless if you don't have the people to actually make it happen.
So how did this even happen? How did Germany's own watchdog get so, well, small?
It really all goes back to the 2010s, under Chancellor Angela Merkel. A couple of huge decisions were made that changed everything. First, they decided to shrink the army, and shrink it a lot. Then, in 2011, they got rid of mandatory military service altogether. From then on, the army was a volunteer-only force, depending heavily on that neighbor's dog, the United States, for its real defense.
And what's really fascinating here is why they did it. It all came down to money. This number on the screen, that was the prize. These cuts were all about saving 8.3 billion euros from the defense budget. People called it a peace dividend. In a stable world, it looks like a brilliant economic move.
And for a while, it seemed like a pretty smart decision. But then, the wolf showed up at the door. The world changed, and that feeling of stability, it just completely evaporated.
Just look at these numbers. They show a really staggering mismatch. Germany's active forces are absolutely dwarfed by Russia's. But honestly, the scariest part is the reserves. Russia has millions of them. Germany, practically none, falling so short of the 200,000 soldier goal it promised NATO. And this isn't some problem for 5 or 10 years down the road anymore. The timeline has shrunk. Now, European leaders are saying a direct attack on NATO territory could happen, and I quote, at any moment. That makes this personnel shortage a full-blown urgent crisis.
So Germany needs soldiers, and it needs them like yesterday. But there's one enormous obstacle standing in the way: its own youth.
A recent study paints a pretty shocking picture. When young Germans, Gen Z, were asked if they would fight for their country, the answer was just overwhelming. A staggering 81% said no.
And this quote from a young person in Germany really just says it all. There's this deep feeling of being disconnected. Like the country they'd be asked to defend has basically left them behind to deal with a pile of economic problems they had no part in creating.
Their reasons are complex. It's this potent mix of anxiety about money and a real distrust of the government. But you also have to remember, this is layered on top of decades of a pretty unique German culture of pacifism and a very healthy skepticism of anything military. We're talking about a generation that's been told they'll probably be worse off than their parents, and now they don't see why they should be the ones to defend a system they feel has already failed them.
So with almost no one volunteering, the government is trying a new tactic. And some people are calling it a pretty desperate move before they have to do something much more drastic.
This new law, it's a very delicate balancing act. On one hand, service is still voluntary, for now. But to sweeten the deal, they're bumping up the pay quite a bit. The really crucial part, though, is what's becoming mandatory. All 18-year-old guys have to fill out a military questionnaire, and mandatory physicals are coming. A lot of people see this as the first step toward bringing back the draft.
But the whole plan is kind of backfiring with the very people they need to convince. Protests have already started. Young people are looking at this less like an opportunity and more like the government slowly backing them into a corner, getting ready to force them to fight.
And that leaves us with this massive, looming question about the future. When you have a generation that doesn't want to fight, a military that was deliberately downsized, and a threat that is getting more real every single day, could Germany's and, by extension, all of Europe's crisis of defense actually signal a fundamental shift in who holds power on the world stage?